You are Miss Tora Faust. Nice to meet you. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet
So,
you.
correct pronunciation is Ima Tor Faust.
Yes.
Okay, okay.
Great pronunciation.
Okay, okay. And now we are waiting just. You need a translator. Dajte jedan, molim vas, ovaj. No, in English. Except Mr. Lu Shai will speak in Chinese.
You can remind the audience, because some
Yeah,
of them
when I
don't-
start.
yeah,
When I
don't-
start.
yeah,
When I
don't
start.
have it, okay.
Yeah, when I start. Nice to meet you. Hello. Hello. Okay, thank you. Dear guests, welcome to our panel discussion, Universal Values in a Multipolar World. What can we learn from each other? And the panelists are, from my left side, it's Ms. Ima Tor-Faust, she's Minister of Foreign Affairs of Andorra. Then it's Mr. Lu Shae, Special Representative of the Chinese government on European affairs. And Mr. Lu Shae will speak in Chinese, so please prepare your headphones before his discussion. Ms. Clara Breuer, she is State Secretary at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Hungary. Also with us is here Mari Bashimova, she is Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs from Turkmenistan. Also here is Mr. Nacho Sanchez Amor, he is member of the European Parliament from Spain and member of the Socialists and Democrats parliamentary faction. And also the last, Mr. Paul McCarthy, he is the Senior Research Fellow for European Affairs from the Heritage Foundation in the United States. So I'm honored to moderate a panel with such distinguished speakers. We have ambitious goals in this discussion, but I believe they are achievable. So I will start with first round of the questions, and you will all refer to the same topic. So the title of our discussion is Universal Values in a Multipolar World, and what can we learn from each other? So I'm wondering, and public is wondering, are all values universally applicable, or maybe there are some values and principles that are incompatible with certain political, cultural, and religious traditions? Can there be alternative conception of fundamental political rights and freedoms? Ms. Tor-Faust, floor is yours.
Thank you, and first of all, I would like to thank the Croatian authorities for inviting me to this very important forum. In Andorra, of course, we firmly believe in universal values, and these values, in fact, actually guide all our states' national and international action. In fact, the first article of our constitution proclaims, I quote, proclaims respect for and the promotion of freedom, equality, justice, tolerance, the defense of human rights and human dignity as the inspiring principles of the Andorran state actions. Andorra is a country founded in the Middle Ages in 1278, And Andorra became a state and joined the international community with this constitution of 1993, a constitution which also granted the country full freedom and independence in the exercise of its sovereignty. As a small state, Andorra places particular importance on dialogue, cooperation, and principles-based multilateralism. And let me remind that these universal values are not abstract ideals detached from reality. They are the outcome of a shared human experience and a political compromise. The multilateral system we know today, rooted in the United Nations Charter, was built precisely on the recognition that despite profound differences in history, in culture, in religion, and in governance, despite these differences, states could still agree on a set of fundamental principles enabling a peaceful existence. These principles emerge in response to the tragedies of the 20th century, when the international community collectively affirmed that certain acts, such as war crimes and crimes against humanity, were unacceptable under any circumstances. These principles serve as the standard for the universal values that must be upheld. And that is why we strongly believe in multilateralism as a means of fostering these values. I must, however, acknowledge that in today's multipolar world, and it's the main issue of this forum, the challenge no longer lies in reaching a consensus on the existence of these values, but in their interpretation, in their prioritization and implementation. It is precisely why small, like Andorra, and medium-sized states have a particular role to play. For countries of our size, international institutions are not merely diplomatic platforms, they are essential spaces where every state has a voice and where our differences must be managed through dialogue rather than through power. And in this regard, for us, for Andorra, fostering multilingualism and promoting cultural diversity are among our top priorities. And we believe that we should bear in mind this very important UNESCO Convention, which is the Convention on the Protection and the Promotion of the Diversity of Cultural Expressions. This convention reminds us that cultural diversity must be protected, but it can only be protected and promoted, and I quote, if human rights and fundamental freedoms, such as freedom of expression, information and communication, as well as the ability of individuals to choose cultural expressions, are guaranteed. So we consider that political, cultural, and religious traditions cannot be invoked to infringe human rights and fundamental freedoms as enshrined in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and guaranteed by international law.
Thank you. Andorra has a Catholic bishop as a co-head of state, so it reminded me to introduce myself. I'm Jakub Žižić. I'm a professor of political science at the Catholic University. Mr. Lou Chae, your thoughts about universal applicability of the values, or there are some special paths or special traditions of values. Please use your headphones.
谢谢主持人。这个世界各国人民和民族，他们所创造的文明都是有可取之处的，都是有他们的长处，因此，彼此之间那是绝对可以交流互鉴的。 所以中国领导人提出了全球文明倡议，主张以文明对话来取代文明对抗，以文明交流来取代文明隔阂，以文明平等来取代文明优越，就是这个意思。但是呢，在这个交流互鉴的过程中，我们认为应该遵循2条原则，一个就是要根据本国的实际有所取舍，是吧？就是按中国的老话就是说，取其精华，弃其糟粕。因为有很多外国的文明的东西不一定适合本国的，就像主持人刚才在提这个问题里边讲的，可能与本国的一些政治的、宗教的、文化的因素相冲突的东西，就不能够接受，是吧？比如说，在西方国家，你们已经这个废弃了死刑，但中国人就不会接受废弃死刑，这只是一个很简单的例子，是吧？西方的文明里边一直是有一种这种拉帮结派、搞这个集团政治的传统，从你们的古希腊时候就开始，但中国是一贯反对这样的做法的。第2个原则就是要统一的标准，不能搞双重标准，不能说对一部分人采取一种标准，落到了自己身上就是另外一种这个情况，这是第1个问题。第2个呢，关于这个普世价值我觉得这个定义是一个很重要的事儿。谁来定义普世价值？它的标准是什么？是谁的普世价值？是吧？你西方国家，它有经常挂在口头上的、嘴上的就是普世价值。那中国呢？中国我们提出的是全人类共同价值，但我们的共同价值里边的内涵包括和平、发展、公平、正义，也有民主和自由。但是我们讲的民主和自由，我相信可能跟西方国家他们的民主和自由内涵是不一样的，比如说民主，我认中国的民主是人民当家作主，真正是人民当家作主。但西方国家的民主这个概念，经过我的研究和思考，不过就是政治游戏规则。政治游戏规则，选票嘛，是吧？这个少数服从多数。那么在西方的这个所谓的政治价值里边，也就是说高于民主这个政治工具的之上的政治价值，恐怕就是金主，它不是人民当家作主，而是资本当家作主，是吧？我可能讲的比较直你们也可以思考。那么中国的这个政治价值是人民当家作主，那么实现这个政治价值的手段和途径是什么呢？我们就是全过程人民民主这么一个制度。那么从我们的自古以来就是一种中央集权的国家体制，是吧？那么在这个基础上，我们现在又发展出一个全过程人民民主，那么里边有一系列的制度设计，包括民主选举，包括民主执政，包括民主协商，包括民主这个监督，就是整个这个国家治理的过程，人民都会参与进去，我就先讲这么多吧，就是讲所谓的普世价值，它没有一定的这个标准概念。如果想搞一个一定的标准，那么恐怕就只能请联合国出面，把世界各国招在一起，大家商量商量什么叫普世价值。谢谢。
Thank you, Mr. Luce. Ms. Bashimova, my question is, universal values in a multipolar world, what can we learn from each other, from your point of view?
Thank you, dear moderator, distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I would like to thank to the government of Croatia for the invitation to participate in this forum. The theme of our session is extremely relevant. Today we live in an era of multipolar world in which different countries, cultures and civilizations are playing an increasingly significant role in shaping the global agenda. However, an important question stands before us. Will multipolarity become a source of new divisions, disputes, and mistrust, or it can serve as a foundation for more just, respectful, and sustainable international order? This is where the issue of universal values gets special significance. When we speak about universal values, it is important to understand that they should not imply the imposition of a single development model or a single worldview. Universal values cannot belong exclusively to one region, one political system, or one civilization. They become truly universal only when different peoples, cultures, and states recognize in them a common moral foundation for harmony, cooperation, and the joint resolution of shared challenges. For example, the countries of Central Asia have for centuries stood at the crossroads of civilizations. The Great Silk Road was not just a trade road. It was also a space for the exchange of knowledge, ideas, and cultural traditions. This historical experience demonstrates that diversity can be a source of strength rather than conflict. Turkmenistan consistently promotes the principles of peace, good neighborliness, and international cooperation. Of particular importance is the status of permanent neutrality of Turkmenistan, recognized by the international community. Neutrality demonstrates that dialogue and mutual respect can create conditions for stability and trust even in a complex international environment. What can we learn from one another? We can learn to respect cultural diversity while remaining true to our own traditions. We can learn from innovation and technological advancement while preserving humanistic values. We can adopt best practices in education, science, environmental protection, and youth policy. Most importantly, we can learn to listen to one another. Perhaps the ability to listen with respect is one of the most important universal values of our time. A special role in this process belongs, of course, to young people. Today's youth have unprecedented opportunities to communicate through education, scientific projects, international forums, and digital technologies. Young people become bridges between cultures and contribute to the creation of a more just and secure world. When we speak about global challenges, climate change, security threats, inequality of the spread of new technologies, it becomes evident that no country can address them alone. We need solidarity, trust, and shared sense of responsibility. Therefore, universal values in a multipolar world are not an abstract concept. They constitute a practical foundation for cooperation, mutual understanding, and sustainable development. For my country, this approach is of fundamental importance.
Thank you. Ms. Breyer, your thoughts about universality of the universal values. Are democratic political institutions and political liberties, are they universally applicable, or maybe they depend on some national and cultural and religious conditions?
Thank you very much. And I'd like to say at the beginning that I'm very glad that the Dubrovnik Forum decided to have this discussion, because I think that in our really multipolar world with so many surfacing new problems, it is very important that we are putting our actions on values, and we never forget values when we are doing something in diplomacy or in international relations. For me, and I'd like to say, this freedom or liberty is a very core value in the physical sense, in the spiritual sense, or in the conscience, and also as a form of expression. So freedom is very important for me, and I hope that it can be a core universal value, because I think we are in the same human race. We are part of humanity, all of us, and I think everybody deserves this. In Europe, I suppose we are quite fortunate that we can say that from the Greek philosophers through Roman law, then Christianity, later on Renaissance or the Enlightenment, they are layers of our set of values. And in the 20th century, I think for us in Europe, it's the common Europe, the acquis of the European Union, and all those values that we share in the Union are very important for us. Hungary shares these values, and as you know, we had recently elections, and I think these values are strengthened in Hungary with the new government in place. Now, I'd like to say that I don't think that such values are only built up in Europe or in this kind of Western civilization. All those values surely can be found in different mindsets, different cultures, and I think it is our common task to find the way how it is expressed, how it is surfaced in another culture. Again, I need to say that it is in our common future that we don't let the wish and the desire go, that we'd like to base our actions on universal values, even if the expression is different. We are, I think, in a very crucial moment in human history. And we do have the UN, which somehow sometimes I feel that we a little bit disregard, though we all belong to the World Organization, and I think it's very important to remember that. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Sanchez Amor, can there be different standards of democracy, rule of law, checks and balances, political rights and liberties?
Well, thank you, Jacob. I'm guessing I'm representing here the European Union, and the European Union, not of course clearly representing the European Union, but coming from an European institution, I'll try to complete the picture. We are a very strange monster, the European Union, for many reasons. We are getting rid of the sovereignty. Sovereignty is clearly entrenched in the current way of thinking in the world, and we are getting rid of sovereignty in many aspects. You remember when we studied that the core concept of sovereignty is defense, currency, and we are getting rid of all of that. And other of our particularities is not only that we are funded in the values that has been mentioned by Clara and Iman and the others, not only we have been founded in this relation, it's a constitutional duty of the of the European institutions to conduct the foreign policy under the principles and values of promotion of democracy. Promotion means you have to do things actively. It's not to respect, it's not to interfere. On the contrary, we have a constitutional mandate to, let's say, interfere. This is a question. But that puts the European Union in a very particular position regarding universality of human rights. And we were on the verge of having fully fledged content of human dignity when we drafted the Declaration of Human Rights. And when I say we, I say what we call the Western civilization and the Chinese one. And something has been forgotten in the meantime, because the contribution of the Ambassador Pen Chun-chan to the Declaration of Human Rights, it was a key to introduce the Confucianism ideas and values in the Declaration. And it's true, even the abstentions of the Soviet world was instrumental because the lack of criticism of the fascists and Nazis and the lack of putting relevance on the social values. But even the Soviet world challenged consistently the core of the idea that we agreed at the content at that moment, in the 40s of the last century, in a content of what means human dignity. And we translate human dignity in a set of values and principles. And what happened later, this idea was started to depict as a colonialist, neo-imperialist, but the Declaration of Human Rights has many ideas coming from the East. It's the idea of Ren, conscience in Confucianism, empathy, the values of norms, the value of family. It's colonialist from East to West, because sometimes when we talk about transferable, we always think about Western to South and to East. It was not the case. The question is, are we able to agree again in a complete setting on values and principles and rights to feel the content of the idea of human dignity or not? Because we were on the verge of doing less than 1 century ago. And my idea is we have to try. We have to try to agree on another setting of principles and values really universal. And if they are not universal, they are not transferable. Meaning, if they are transferable, it's a cultural exportation. But if they are agree on the universal values, they have to be universally accepted, meaning not non-transferable, but accepted.
Just one remark: when you mentioned the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, people who created it were also proponents of Christian democracy, also, or in Confucianism, definitely, but also like the founders of the European Union. Mr. McCarthy, tell us your opinion. Can there be different standards of freedom of thought, of conscience, of freedom of speech and expression? Can it be dependent on some national circumstances, or there are some basic standards of these institutions and liberties?
Well, first of all, I wanted to thank the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Croatia for inviting me to speak, to lend an American voice. I wish there were more American voices here, but there it is. I will shoulder the responsibility for all of the United States, past, present, and future as best as I can, but I know we have very limited time. When I look at universal values, they are real, but institutions are national. And what I mean by that is, for many years, the United States has been, as my friend Nacho just mentioned, promoting democracy overseas, which I think was viewed by many countries as an imposition of systems on their countries. And I think that was a wrong approach. And the Heritage Foundation, as the largest conservative organization in America, we believe that we shouldn't confuse universal principles with a one-size-fits-all system. America does not need to export its institutions wholesale, but as conservatives, we believe that free speech, religious liberty, human dignity, rule of law, and limits on state power are not cultural luxuries. They are basic restraints on arbitrary authority. So values are universal, institutions are national. If a government says culture or a system requires silencing its peoples, the issue is not culture or values, it is pure power, and we have to keep that in mind. What is also important is national sovereignty. Sovereignty is essential, but it belongs to nations and peoples, not just regimes. National sovereignty is the foundation of self-government. Without sovereignty, citizens cannot control their borders, laws, institutions, or future. But sovereignty cannot become a blank check for ruling parties wherever they exist, including my own. It protects nations from external domination. It should not protect governments from accountability. So sovereignty protects self-government. It should not shield repression. Non-interference cannot mean moral silence, and I'll stop there.
Thank you, Mr. McCarthy. Ms. Faust, do you agree with this remark that the importance of national sovereignty and that values are universal, but the institutions are national, and this importance of national sovereignty, how do you look at this?
Well, Andorra, as you know, is a very small country, a country of 90,000 inhabitants, and our sovereignty is quite recent. It came with this constitution of 1993. So yes, we attach great importance to sovereignty and to non-interference. And now, at this moment, I must say that we are very concerned about foreign information manipulation and interference. About this new plague, this new kind of interference, technological interference that threatens not only democracies, as we have seen, particularly in this region, but also universal principles and values. And we think that the fight against this modern form of interference constitute really a global strategic challenges, because there is this question of universal values that can be threatened through this system. So non-interference in the internal affairs of a sovereign state is a very important principle and a norm of international law. But at the same time, sovereignty and non-interference cannot be invoked to violate fundamental values. We consider that states' autonomy is conditional upon the protection of fundamental rights of the populations, or upon, for example, the risks of a war that could escalate and that could lead to a humanitarian disaster. We think that absolute sovereignty does not exist, and intervention against a state, of course, provided that it is carried out in accordance with international law, may be justified, for example, in cases of blatant violations of human rights and freedoms, of course, crimes against humanity and threats to international peace and security. Sovereignty is not a set of rights specific to a state. On the contrary, it is closely linked with the rights of the people of that state. So, in conclusion, I can say that sovereignty is therefore an important principle, but it is not a universal one.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Lou Chae, how do you see this national sovereignty and non-interference in internal affairs of other sovereign states? Do you see this as more important than some standards of political freedoms and political systems and institutions?
这个国家主权原则和不干涉内政原则是国际法的基本准则。这个应该说，至少从第二次世界大战之后，就是国际上普遍实行的。它确保了大小国家一律平等，特别是确保了小国、穷国、弱国维护自身的主权地位，它是一道法律的屏障，不能够轻易的破坏掉。当然了，有的人说，如果一个国家的政权 它不民主啊，它这个腐败，或者是残暴，它压迫自己的人民，国际社会可不可以干预？可以，但是不能搞双重标准，还是我刚才这个意思。那么可以，谁来评判某个国家是不民主的，是残暴的，是压迫人民的呢？谁来评判？不是由那些大国、强国、富裕的国家来评判，对不对啊？国际社会不仅有大国、强国和富裕的国家，还有小国、弱国和贫穷的国家。因此，我认为，如果做出评判的话，应该由联合国来做出评判，这是目前为止最公正的，联合国是吧？那么你做出评判以后，国际社会谁来干预？也不是说由某一部分国家来干预，目前来看最公正的恐怕也就是联合国来干预。另外就是要不能双重标准，你大国、富国可以指责小国、弱国、穷国，这个那个的。那么反过来，如果你们这些国家内部也存在类似的问题，别的国家可不可以指责你呢？可不可以干涉你呢？是吧？比如说你这个国家的老百姓没有安全感，是吧？每年的枪击案死4、5万人，每年的毒品泛滥死10几万人，是吧？斩杀线导致中产阶级一夜之间这个一贫如洗，流落街头，这种情况是不是说明这个政权有问题？国际社会是不是要干预？如果大家是搞同一标准，不搞双重标准，我们完全赞成。这样的话会使国际社会更加的这个和平、繁荣、民主、自由。中国提出了这个全球治理倡议，5条原则或者讲5个理念。第一条就是奉行主权平等，是吧？第二个叫尊重国际法治，第三是践行多边主义，大家商量着办。第四是倡导以民为本。第五是坚持这个行动导向，不能光说，你要做。所以我在这儿呼吁大家好好研究研究中国习近平主席提出的全球治理倡议，它里边的内涵是非常丰富的，它就是针对我们当今世界面临的问题提出的中国的解决方案，是吧？至于刚才讲的这种一些普世价值，我在座的有一些嘉宾非常强调普世价值，我还是觉得就是你普世价值的统一的标准是什么？我觉得有一些基本的评判标准，比如说一个国家民主不民主，要看这个国家老百姓的日子好过不好过，是不是有改善，老百姓的获得感、幸福感、安全感是不是在不断的提升？如果是这样，这个国家是民主的。如果一个国家他的老百姓几十年的收入没有增长，他民主吗？他就是在选举的时候到投票站投个票，他的利益得到保障了吗？讲自由也不能够泛泛而谈，要具体，是吧？你在街上走路有没有被偷盗的恐慌恐惧，被打劫的恐惧，被暴力袭击的恐惧，安全感，是吧？这个前一阵有一个法国的博主，他在找了世界几个主要的国家做了一次测试，安全感的测试。他把一台笔记本电脑放在一个公共场所，然后躲在一边去观察多少时间这个笔记本电脑会被偷走。在美国，30秒被偷走；在印度，12秒被偷走；在他的祖国法国，8秒被偷走；在中国，这个笔记本电脑他放在那儿放了3个小时，没有人去偷，最后他实在等不及了，只好自己去把它拎走。这就是自由，这是我们中国人理解的自由。 谢谢。
Thank you. Ms. Bashimova, speaking about this national sovereignty and non-interference, can you maybe explain us this Turkmenistan stance of neutrality in today's multipolar age?
Thank you for your question. So I would like to draw your attention to the unique policy of neutrality promoted by my country. We would be pleased to share our experience in this regard. The permanent neutrality of Turkmenistan, recognized by the United Nations General Assembly, is not just a foreign policy status. For us, it is also a practical philosophy of international engagement. Neutrality does not mean isolation. It does not mean indifference to international developments. Turkmenistan's neutrality represents an active, positive, and responsible approach to peace. It means choosing dialogue over confrontation. It means building bridges rather than walls. It means recognizing that international relations should not be based solely on the logic of for or against. They should be guided by the principles for peace, for trust, for cooperation, and for a common future. This is the main lesson that Turkmenistan can share. Even in a complex and challenging world, it is possible to remain open to all, respectful toward all, and ready to cooperate with all. Today, as the international situation remains tense, such an approach is becoming increasingly relevant. We see a growing number of situations in which states no longer communicate directly with one another, where trust has been eroded and differences are perceived as threats. Yet it is in such situations that diplomacy becomes particularly important. From Turkmenistan's perspective, dialogue itself it's a universal value. Dialogue does not mean agreement on every issue. It does not mean giving up one's own principles. Dialogue means recognizing that without communications, respect, and willingness to understand the position of the other side, lasting peace and stability cannot be achieved. That is why Turkmenistan consistently promotes a culture of peace, trust, and preventive diplomacy. Ashgabat hosts the United Nations Regional Center for Preventive Diplomacy for Central Asia. Its work reflects a very important principle. Diplomacy should act before crises become irreversible. The strength of a multipolar world should not lie in making everyone the same. Rather, it should lie in enabling different states and societies to find common ground while preserving their uniqueness. From this perspective, Turkmenistan advocates an international order based on respect for sovereignty, non-interference in the internal affairs of states, the peaceful settlements of disputes, equal dialogue, and strict adherence to the Charter of the United Nations. For us, international law remains one of the key in universal reference points. Today, Turkmenistan is promoting the initiative to declare 2028 as the International Year of International Law, aimed at strengthening the international legal framework and enhancing the effectiveness of the principal organs of the United Nations. For this reason, Turkmenistan supports the strengthening of the rule of the United Nations and the further development of international cooperation based on law, trust, and mutual respect. Thank you.
Thank you a lot. Ms. Breuer, so we spoke about this national sovereignty and non-interference. What do you think? Can these concepts, can it be misused maybe also for some countries that violate and breach basic political rights and civil liberties and checks and balances? And what to do then? Are there any institutions who could maybe judge it and make intervention in these kind of situations?
I think Europe's history saw endless number of wars over sovereignty during the different centuries. After the biggest carnage, the tragic Second World War, there were some wise people and started to create the coal and steel community, which now we call the European Union. All nations belonging to the European Union are sovereign nations, and if I take my own country, the Hungarians are very, very proud. Hungarians with their history as an independent state for 1,000 years. But I think there was a point when other countries, and later Hungary, were in the position that we wanted to join, and we exercise some of our sovereignty jointly or together. And I don't think it weakens us, it strengthens us. I think there can be other good cooperation forms in other parts of the world. And with the question of sovereignty interference, another important concept needs to be mentioned, and this is the resolution of conflicts in a peaceful manner. It is, I think, very, very important. And unfortunately, we can see negative examples over this issue. Where to turn in such cases? Again, I need to mention that, again, after the Second World War, we created the United Nations, and I think that should be a stronger body and a place where even real action is done in such cases when somebody violates somebody else's sovereignty. Now, it was mentioned, and I'd like to echo that problem as well, that interference with sovereignty, we used to think of other countries. And now I think at the technological level that our civilization reached, it is, I think, important to research what other actors can interfere into somebody's or some nation's sovereignty. It is a very, very important new topic. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Sanchez, we opened this discussion about who will set the standards of universal values, who will judge if they are implemented, and how do you see this situation? Could the European Union be this institution, this organization that could judge about violations of certain political values and an institution, or this could be maybe taking responsibilities of some other institutions, or even breaching the sovereignty of their member states or other sovereign states?
No, not the European Union for sure. We would like to ban on international bodies like United Nations or other. But you mentioned who is able to judge. The only person able to judge is the person who decides what the word means. And I try to challenge the ideas of Ambassador Lushaye. If we conduct a kind of experiment similar to the laptop left in a park, and we put in New York a person with a banner protesting for whatever thing. This person protesting for whatever political reason is going to stay one day, another day, and for weeks. If you go to Russia, to Putin's Russia, and you have a blank, not one single word, sustained that way, it's seconds to be violently detained. And for that reason, when ambassadors say freedom is to have a kind of economic security, no, sir, freedom is freedom. We know it. We know, every one of us. We know what is being freedom. Freedom is the possibility to express your personality. It's freedom of press, it's freedom of association, it's freedom to create parties, it's freedom to vote. We know what means political liberties and freedoms. Then other thing is the economic security. But if you pretend to pass the message that if you have a kind of economic security, this is a free society, this is not true. We have to come at least to agree on the language. And I know the rationale of many policies occurring in China, and I think that could be even defended. But don't mislead the people about words. Political liberties are political liberties. We know in Europe, we know what political liberties are because we express and we use the political liberties on a daily basis. Another thing is the economic security. That is very important for sure, and probably if there is no economic security, there is going to be some social clashes and social crisis and so on. But don't use different languages, because if we use different languages, it's going to be impossible to agree what is the core content of human dignity everywhere in the planet. And this is the only thing we can agree is going to be universal. And there are many other things that are not universal. And sometimes we, the Europeans, we try to impose our standards as universal, clashing with other traditions. But at least during the 40s, we agreed on the Declaration of Human Rights. Later, we introduced another rights linked to sexual moral, sexual preferences, abortion and others that could clash with other society. But at least try to identify what is the common ground, what is the common denominator of human dignity, because these are universal values. Maybe are not the same that they were in the 40s. Maybe there are others that have been exaggerated in other parts of the world coming from the Western world. But my main motto is, let's try to agree on what is now the content of human dignity, because these are the universal values. And there are others. We are very respectful with homosexuality in the Western life. There are other societies, because many reasons they don't consider this a right, but this is perfect. This is a cultural difference, and we have to defend the cultural difference, but at least try to identify what is the core content of the idea of human dignity. This is my motto. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McCarthy. Do you agree, as a conservative, with your social democratic peer regarding this issue?
Yeah, I have to pinch myself right now, because what you just said, sir, is quite close to what conservatives in the United States agree with perhaps a difference on the worth of the United Nations. That's probably where we would disagree. But absolutely, we're talking about national sovereignty. National sovereignty is rooted in the people's sovereignty. It comes from the person who has the right to choose his or her elected representatives in the hope that they will provide economic security. No system is perfect. However, we believe that systems like this are self-correcting through elections, even with our current administration. And if people do not like the elected representatives, they will turn them out of office. There is a self-correcting mechanism in systems protected by national sovereignty. And this is the foundation here. I'll use those terms, America First position, which is how I would describe where the United States is going under the second administration of Donald Trump, even under Donald Trump. Donald Trump is accused of being an authoritarian. However, we just had the Democratic Socialists of America sweep elections in New York State, and they're going from strength to strength. That is a good thing in my mind, in the sense of the sovereignty of the people and their ability to choose who their elected representatives are. And the sovereignty of the people is rooted in the government's protection of their basic rights. Their right to protest, for example, if they want to. An experiment where you leave a computer out and see how long it takes to be stolen ignores the punitive aspects of the state in which you leave the computer around before it's stolen. For example, there may be a fear factor involved in this. We believe that an overweening state which crushes the rights of individuals is not a state worthy of the name. It is simply based on power, not on the people's sovereignty.
Thank you, and we are almost finished, so about, for everyone, 30 seconds, maybe just a final remark and a wrap up. First year.
Yes, as a final remark, I would say that well, of course, from a historical perspective, universal values are rooted in the Western philosophy. The 18th century Enlightenment, the French Revolution, some concepts are even older, dating back to Greco-Roman antiquity, Judeo-Christian morality. But I do not think that these principles are unfair to non-Western nations. They are not a rigid model imposed by some upon others. Rather, I would define them as a common ground for a better humanity, a common foundation that enables cooperation among diverse societies and very diverse peoples. And as an Andorran representative, Andorra is member of different geolinguistic organizations. For example, International Organization of La Francophonie or the Ibero-American Organization. And in these organizations, there are member states from all the continents. And I think, of course, there is the United Nations, but I think that these linguistic, cultural organizations, that they can help to the dialogue between civilizations.
Thank you.
And I just wanted to say that, for example, some difficult issues in some countries, like excision of little girls in some countries, or early marriage, through dialogue, or even the abolition of death penalty, within this dialogue, things can progress.
I will ask you just for brief,
yes.
short,
sorry, I'm
final
sorry,
remarks.
but I wanted
Mr.
to say
Lushai, the floor is yours.
这个刚才麦卡锡先生讲的关于偷盗的这个表述，我理解就是说，在西方国家，偷盗也是一种自由。那么，由于国家政权对偷盗没有严厉的惩处，因此这些小偷们，他免于恐惧，所以他们有偷盗的自由。第二，我认为自由不是绝对的。这个西方国家呢，它是把自由局限在政治领域，只有政治自由。然而，人类它的自由是方方面面，远远超出政治的范畴，经济的、社会的、文化的，包括人种的。第三，就是刚才我讲的，自由不是绝对的。世界人权宣言 怎么表述的？表达自由不是绝对的，它受一定条件的限制。公民在行使自由和权利的时候，不得损害国家的、社会的、集体的利益和其他公民的合法的自由和权利。谢谢。
Thank you. Ms. Bashimova, any
Yeah,
final remarks?
Yeah, as a final remarks, I want to say thank you to you, dear moderator. Thanks to the government of Croatia for this very important forum, for this very important session. I wish all the best to you and to your country. Thank you.
Thank you a lot. Ms. Brer?
Thank you. I used to be ambassador in Helsinki, and I was in Helsinki at the moment when we were celebrating the anniversary of the Helsinki Declaration. And a young documentary filmmaker created a very good film on the process, and the title is The Helsinki Effect. I recommend it to everybody to watch. It's a lovely documentary. But why I'm mentioning this? When the document was signed, some people were saying that this is very weak and it doesn't worth anything, but it took several years to be created, and the film explains how important it became later on, and it was an important guidance for many countries on what we are agreeing on and perhaps what not, but rather the positive side I'd like to emphasize. And as you were saying, sir, that we might need to revisit this topic, universal values, I really think that we need to revisit it almost every day just to make sure that we don't forget them when we do need to do a lot of action because we are solving problems and crises.
Yeah, I also recommend the documentary. You can see it on YouTube. Mr. Sanchez, just a brief.
Thank you. I think the big obstacle to have a common understanding of the universality of rights is based in a very deep, different understanding of the societies. For us, for the Western civilization, the atom, the cell of the society is the individual. For other traditions and civilizations are the communities, the family, the ethnic or religious community, or the state. Anyway, I think we can encounter a middle way to try to agree on exploring the feasibility of a common standard on universal values, despite this big, deep divide. But we have to adopt, we the Western, we have to understand that we are very individualistic, for the Christians, for the French Revolution, for the Enlightenment, but we have to try to approach other ideas regarding society, the communitarism that is very frequent in Asian and Asian values. I think we need to encounter a way to come back again to what we did in the 40s of the last century, is to recreate a declaration of, again, universal values suitable for today's world. Thank you.
Mr. McCarthy, very briefly.
Yes, very briefly. All countries, especially the United States, should respect sovereign nations. And I want to go back and say that the basic building block of this is the nation state rooted in individual liberty and not supranational institutions. So we should respect sovereign nations. We should reject reckless interventionism and still defend the principles that make free societies possible: religious liberty, free speech, rule of law, limited government, and especially the consent of the governed. The real divide in today's world is not West versus non-West. It is whether power is limited by liberty or whether liberty is defined by power. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we were able to hear very different but thoughtful ideas and remarks. I would like to thank you all, and I think that the participants deserve applause. Thank you a lot.